So it looks like we've got our next guest. Hey, Kate, how are you doing?
Great, how are you doing today?
Great, it's great to have you on. And you are with?
I am actually a student, but I'm
You are a
student
here at George Mason, and what were you speaking on?
Speaking on patient engagement and empowerment, primarily.
Well, it's funny you just mentioned that, because that's what we just finished this last conversation on, was patient engagement. So, and did you also spend some time in the Click booth looking through things as well?
Yeah, really
so,
interesting stuff.
Great, so let's first talk about, you said you spoke on patient engagement. What did you talk about?
So I'm actually speaking this upcoming Thursday.
Oh, it's coming up,
from 1 to 2, session 251, if you want to tune in. And we're being live streamed, which is exciting.
Great.
So a little bit about my background. I was originally a patient. About 10 years ago, I got really sick with a severe case of Lyme disease. Lost the ability to read and write, was wheelchair bound, really went downhill very quickly. And we were dealing with massive amounts of data that were really hard to...
yeah, go ahead.
Dealing with massive amounts of data that were that was really hard to manage. And my mother at the time was a rocket scientist and discovered that it was literally easier for her to launch a satellite into space than to manage my data.
Absolutely.
So she started playing around with different kinds of ways to capture that data and started having me produce my own data. So I started writing down, what I was feeling, the severity of my symptoms, all of these things. And it really made it much easier to manage my condition and communicate with my doctors. And I ended up getting better because of it, because we were managed to harness my own data and really represent myself, represent me and my story to my doctors. So I ended up getting better. Within a year, I became an EMT because I was interested in healthcare. So I switched from a year from riding in ambulances to serving patients in ambulances.
Excellent.
But I discovered in the back of the ambulance that many of the patients that we were transporting didn't need to be there. There were all these population health factors that were way more critical for us to be facing. So I'm in college now, pursuing a health administration and policy degree with an interest in population health. Which is why seeing the Click dashboards are so interesting. Pulling all of that critical data is so important.
So what did you see when you were looking through the Click dashboards? What were you looking at and what really pinged you?
Yeah, so I was looking at some of your readmission rates, some of your views of different kinds of populations that you're serving. For me, I think one of the things that really interests me is social determinants of health and environmental determinants of health. So being able to see when you're dealing with a hospital population, where are these people living? Do they have a car to get to their appointments? What's the air quality like? There's all these different things that we don't think about. When I was transporting patients, one of the biggest things that kept happening is patients weren't getting their medication. Well, why aren't they getting their medication? Are they in an area that isn't near a pharmacy? Are they working full time and have 3 kids and they can't get to the pharmacy? And how do we meet patients where they are and better serve them? From every perspective, from an ethical perspective, patients deserve better treatment in this country, but also cost analysis, right? If you're transporting this patient to and from the hospital in an ambulance, it's a very expensive cost. If you can get them their medication ahead of time, it's a lot cheaper and far more effective way of managing their health.
So you said you were sort of focusing on engagement. Tell me about your thoughts on engagement.
Yeah, so I would love to see, there's a lot of new technology coming out, but I think patient voices still aren't really being captured in the conversation. And that's from a lot of different perspectives. I would love to get better accessibility for patients of their medical records to start with. I mean, we're still fighting that, right? A lot of patients still struggle to just get that data to begin with. But also things like medical devices. We don't talk a lot about that, but a lot of medical device companies don't allow patients to access the data. They're wearing these devices and they can't see what their bodies are producing. So I think that's one of the major barriers is just giving patients accessibility to that data to begin with. But also finding, inclusive and user-friendly ways to do that, right? So for me, I compare, getting used to your own patient data kind of like learning a new language, right? It's this whole new system of communication that we aren't really taking advantage of. And I don't know, we would never expect someone to learn, French overnight during incredibly stressful times at high volume. But we expect patients to be able to communicate and navigate that data really suddenly during really difficult times and, a ton at a time. So I think finding better ways to make that transition smoother is really important.
And patient engagement is sort of the hot button item and always has been. I think, once you solve that, it's sort of the holy grail of health and healthcare. As you think about that from a data perspective, what sorts of, you talked about getting the patient voice inside, what sort of data elements might you think of that might be important to begin to put into these systems to ensure that they're getting the information they want?
So I think certain things like total symptom load, pain levels, mental health, I think is a big thing that we don't think about. Mood and depression and all of those different scenarios. A lot of that we don't talk about in terms of capturing data, but I think it'd be great. We have these fabulous EHR systems. We have patient portals are becoming more and more common. Why not allow patients to enter their own data every week or so in terms of where they're at? Make notes. Communicate with their doctors over those things so that when they go into their appointments after 2 months, they don't have to remember off the top of their heads, okay, what has changed over the last 2 months?
Right.
A patient with multiple chronic conditions, they could be seeing 6 or 7 doctors, and that's normal. That's totally normal. So being able to remember all of that information every 2 months with everything that you're dealing with, it's a real burden. Yeah.
As you saw with Click, they're pulling together all these data sources, make it really easy to kind of pull them together.
Yes.
Are there, and you bring up something, just my mind just started racing on this idea. Are there certain elements that an individual might want to say, here's how I like to be communicated with, here's the things I get, here's the things I don't respond to,
right?
Or some of that, maybe you start feeding that data in and if you talk about the other?
Yep. And the other thing too is that sometimes things that look good to prescribe on paper don't work when you go home, right? Like a pain medication that it makes sense to make prescribe on paper, if you're going to school and it prevents you from focusing, you're not going to take that medication, right? You're not going to stick to your care plan, and so your interventions aren't going to work as effectively. If we allow patients to communicate that information to their doctors, but if it's 2 months until the next time you see your doctor, how are you going to communicate that to them? How are you going to say, this isn't working for me, I can't live day to day? So you're just going to stop taking that medication, for better or for worse. So you're totally right. I think helping patients to communicate those kinds of things are really important. The other thing that I think, platforms like Click that pull all of these data points together, it's really powerful for me. I can see my story now. Like when I look at my data, I have in front of me the whole pattern of what happened.
So you would like to have something like this within your portal?
I would love to see something like this within my portal.
And then you could play with it and look at your stuff.
And right, what if you were to have your medications on top of that? What if you were, you could see, okay, at this point, I took this medication and I got really bad. Wow, now I'm just noticing that, right? Maybe this is the medication that's causing it. When you're dealing with so much, it's hard to identify those exact points, right, as a patient. It would be great to be able to visualize that. And the other great thing about these dashboards is, say your mother only speaks Spanish and you're her major caregiver and you have to advocate on her behalf. What if your mom could take a dashboard like that, enter all of her symptoms in Spanish, and then translate it to English for your doctor? That's the power of these things. I mean, when we talk about inclusivity, when we talk about including all kinds of patients in the conversation when it comes to data, that's the power that we have to change. Like, that's a really important thing.
Great. So what year are you in school?
I'm actually a senior. I graduate in May.
Wow. Well, congratulations for that.
Thank you so much.
Do you have a sense of what you'll be doing next, or are you still waiting to figure it out? Which is sort of the norm. Yeah.
I'm waiting to hear back from grad school, so when I hear back from that, make the next move.
And what would you be doing in your grad school if you go there?
Health policy.
Really?
Yeah. I'm interested.
Oh, that is great. Well, we'll have to catch up. I get a little involved in policy myself, so I'd love to talk to you at some point. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for stopping by and telling us a little bit about your obviously expertise and engagement, etc. I hope your presentation goes great. Thursday at 1 o'clock, you said?
1 o'clock, yes.
And what room was it again?
It's session 251.
Session 251.
But it's also going to be live streamed on Facebook if you can't make it.
Right. If you can't make it, catch the live stream. But that one's definitely going to be worth listening to. So thanks again, Kate, for stopping by. And good luck with finishing up on your school program. Fascinating.